So the power that God wants everyone to be able to experience what he was communicating and inviting us to be a part of, number one was this. It's the power to prevail. The power to let your life be about something that will last. He says, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. You go, well, man, how does that work? Well, when he talks about humble, some versions of the Bible, some of you learned it this way: God blesses the meek, right? When he's talking about humility, he's not talking about a passivity. It's not, oh, I'm humble, and oh, I'm just, a worm, an insignificant human being. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking about yourself less. It's an others focus, an others centeredness. And there's a power in this that Jesus is saying that comes to the humble. Humility and meekness is a description of something we would describe as power under control. It's not powerlessness. It's not having a voice. It is knowing how to use your voice and how to use your power for the benefit of others. You see, what they knew at that time was that Rome had learned to exert power over them, to control them, to keep them subjected, to take everything that they wanted to take from them. And that's the way most of the powers in the world work, isn't it? It's a power over. But Jesus says there's a different kind of power. Did he live this? Absolutely, he lived this. Matter of fact, when you read about how things played out in the ministry of Jesus, there came a point in time where he knew that he was going to be betrayed and he was going to be crucified. But right before that happens, he tells his disciples, he goes, hey guys, go get a sword. And he really confuses the daylights out of them. I don't know if you've ever been confused about Jesus, but sometimes Jesus is really hard to figure out. He tells them to go get a sword. He says, as a matter of fact, go sell your coat if you don't have one. They go out, they come back, they go, we got 2 swords. He goes, good. The next day, the army comes to arrest him. Peter goes, I know what the sword is for. Pulls it out, takes a swipe at a guy named Malchus, going for the neck. Malchus ducks, takes his ear off. Jesus picks up Malchus's ear, heals him, puts it on the side of his head, and looks at Peter and he says, put your sword away. Is that a little confusing? Matter of fact, he said this: those who live by the sword will what? Die by the sword. You go, well, why did you tell us to go get swords that you don't want us to use? Is that confusing to anybody else? It's because Jesus was demonstrating something to the army that was coming to arrest him. And it's this: I could use force too, but I won't. Because my power transcends what you can do with the sword. My power is not like the power that men use. I don't use power to kill, and I don't use power to destroy. But I use my power to give hope. I use my power to give life. That's what I use my power for, and that's what humility is. And that's what humility does. Matter of fact, when Jesus was on trial, there's a point where he goes, you guys don't get it, do you? I could call 10,000 angels right now and they could just wipe you out. I could just flamethrower all of you dudes. You're putting me on trial here like this. And by the way, the chief archangel is Chuck Norris. I'm just telling you. It's like you think he's doing push-ups. He's not. He's pushing the earth away. That's him. It's in, you can look it up, seriously. It's in a book of Second Opinions. So Jesus basically says, you guys think I'm a victim because of my humility. No, the humility that you see is power under control. I could destroy you, but that's not why I'm here. See, that's what humility is. And what Jesus is saying to the people is, I know this is hard for you to understand because the Romans are ruling over you. But the fact is the humble, those who use their power to build each other, to build others up, those who use their power to lift others up, those who use their power to think about others, those who use their power that way, you will prevail. And you're living for something that is transcending nations and powers and everything else that you can see. So there's an invitation from Jesus. And what he's saying is, I'm creating this place. I'm creating this world where that's how power is used. It's used by the humble. And the humble prevail because the power that you have and the way you use it will transcend all of the broken, jacked up ways that the power is exercised in the world around you. And that's something that some people have never seen before. So there's that power that he wants to bring into your life, but it requires you to take the power that you have and to let God shape it and to use it for good. The other power that he wants you to experience is the power to become. The power to become something different than what you have been. The power to break free, that the stories and the chapters of your life that have been so painful, that there's something that God can do with those chapters and make it work for something good. And so he says, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for what is right, for justice. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. You will see the fulfillment of those desires. Now, here's the problem. We don't actually naturally hunger and thirst for what's right. Only when we're hurt do we want what's right for us. What we really hunger and thirst for is to be understood. We hunger and thirst to be comfortable. We hunger and thirst to be prosperous. We don't actually think a whole lot necessarily about hunger and thirst in the way that Jesus is talking about it. See, what Jesus is talking about is that when you wake up in the morning, you look at the world, there's a deep desire for what is right to win the day. That it's so much bigger than just the pain that you've gone through. But there is a place of hungering and thirsting for righteousness where when you see what's happening to someone else, it bothers you. And it's not natural. But one of the beautiful things about Jesus is what he invites us to do is not to just step into a space and try to create desires in our hearts, but to literally open up our lives for his Holy Spirit to come into our lives and for him by his Spirit to change our desires. So what we care about transcends what we have been caring about. And now we care about something even greater than ourselves. We hunger and thirst for the world to be right, for justice to prevail, for people to be able to experience what's right for their lives. And no longer are those with all the military power and all those with the economic leverage ruling and oppressing other people with it. But we care that they're treated right because they're valuable as human beings. The opportunity to create. What happens is we look at the chapter of our lives, and a lot of times what we do is we blame God for all the painful chapters in our lives, and we take credit for all the good ones. And a story of God is this. He says, no, you give that all to me. I want to weave that into my story for the whole world. I want to take what you've gone through, and I want to write a new chapter in your life. And this is what he's offering them. He's saying, will you be that person who actually cares like that? Can you imagine a world where it's not all about power and oppression? Can you imagine a world where people in power actually are good to the core? Can you imagine what the world would look like if people used all of that power, all of that might, all of that influence to make sure that things were right? Can you imagine that world? What Jesus is saying is, I'm inviting you to create that with me. Because this is who I am, and this is why I came. And it's what I do. One of the stories of a friend here at the Bridge Church, Paul Pichette. Paul actually plays acoustic guitar on our worship team. He also hangs out with students, has been involved in student ministry. Give it up for Paul and student ministry. But here's an example of someone who had painful chapters in their life. But rather than lock God out because of the pain, came to a point where he was willing to let God change him. He says, I was an extremely small kid, a very late bloomer. When I got my driver's license, I was only 4'10". I was picked on constantly at school and by my older siblings during my whole childhood. I was beaten up in gym class constantly. I know firsthand what being bullied is like. Any of you ever experienced bullying growing up? You understand it. He said, by the time I was 13, I had been abused physically, abused emotionally, and abused sexually, and had 2 failed suicide attempts. 13 years old. Years later, after a failed marriage, a nervous breakdown, and bad church experiences, I was in San Antonio in a dark place that I didn't think I would ever get out of. All sorts of things kept going wrong in my life. When things would go well, I would hit the self-destruct button. Like it seemed I always had done throughout my whole life. I was getting so depressed, I would start thinking about suicide almost every day. I started praying and started getting angry with God. I was angry that after all I had been through, after all the praying, why did he still hate me? I prayed for him to look into my heart and to know how badly I wanted to feel his presence and to know that he was actually there with me. And if he hated me, I demanded to know why. I prayed to him to tell me what I'm doing wrong and what I needed to do. I knew I needed to be around true Christians, but I lost every bit of faith I had in any type of organized religion or church. Finally, I swore to God that if he could show me a church that wasn't full of hypocrites, who cared more about loving people than money, then I would live my life to serve him any way he wanted. I asked what I needed to do, and I would pray this over and over again for months. Without going into all the details, he started out by letting me know that he knew my heart, that I had humbled myself, and that I was ready to accept what he had for me. First, I had to trust that there were churches that were all about loving broken people above all else. I needed to stop thinking of the church as a building, and he would show me that it's all about people. He said I would need to know where to go, and if I was still humbled and used what he put in my heart instead of using what I was thinking all the time, that he would lead me. On March 5th, I attended my first service at the Bridge Church. I can honestly say that it was the first time I actually felt the presence of God. He came here. He would come to First Tuesday services. By the way, how many of you came to First Tuesday this past week? Yeah, it was pretty incredible. Paul shared that he had left after our First Tuesday, but then he realized he's got to meet people if anything's going to change. He came back, he met Debbie Kelly's husband, Brett. Brett introduced him to everybody, invited him to a men's small group. He started to go. There he met Paul White, who invited him to Tim Dove's Saturday morning small group, and he started going to that as well. He came another First Tuesday, and there we kind of had a moment where we would just turn to people and get to know them, people that we didn't know. He says it was there that he met John Barty. And when he met John Barty, who was a student leader, told him about the movement and invited him. And a week later, Paul became a leader to sit there with students. And I want you to think about this for a moment, taking the pain of all that he had experienced. The chapter in his life that would have been so painful that other people would have used to keep them far from God. Something inside of him said, I can't be sitting still when there are students that are experiencing these kind of things that I've gone through. I've got to care. I've got to get involved. Paul not only got involved there, but he's on worship team because he wants people to experience the love of God any way that he can. And he says, so I went from wanting nothing to do with church to having it be everything for me. I've learned the more I humble myself before God and pray with a pure heart, the stronger his voice and presence becomes. I've never been more at peace with myself than I have been the past year. Whenever I'm at the Bridge, I feel at home. God kept his promise to me, and I fully intend to keep my promise to him. I am his humble servant. I thank him every day for his relentless pursuit of me and for his grace that I don't deserve. Can we say thank you to Jesus for what he's done in Paul's life? So we all experience those painful chapters in our lives, but then to entrust those painful chapters to a new author. And I said, God, would you write a new chapter in my life? God, would you now give me the power to become the person you created me to be so that these pains and these hurts no longer define who I am? but you would take these pains and these hurts, and you would work through me to bring freedom to others. That's the power that Jesus invites us to step into. And this was revolutionary. This is not like anything they'd ever seen. Not only does God want you to experience the power to become, but he wants you to experience the third thing, which I call the power to create. The power to create a future, to create a world that doesn't exist. To be able to step into the story of God and to say, God, I want you to do something through my life. God, I want you to create something through my life. And he says, God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those who are merciful, because that was not like the brutality that they have seen in their world. It's not like the brutality that we see going on in our world. But Jesus is saying, I'm inviting you to step into a world that I'm actually creating. And I want you to take your place in it now. And a beautiful thing about all these things is God doesn't expect you to just suddenly be able to just do it. He actually wants to do it with you supernaturally. And so he says, blessed are the merciful. You guys remember like last year with Hurricane Irma, how awful it was? I mean, in time of stress, it took like 3 months for us to get over it. Right? I mean, Irma, you remember what it was like to drive and see piles and piles and piles and piles of debris for weeks upon weeks. You remember how old and how weary it was? Remember how just it would wear you out? And then remember how you felt when you would see this giant truck that would collect debris, and it was clearly from out of town, out of the state somewhere, semi-truck front end, massive back end. You remember how that felt? Right? It's like, matter of fact, some of you I saw on social media were like bringing them cookies. You were like buying them lunch. You were like, thank you so much for being here. And it meant so much to know that somebody from the outside cared. Right? It just felt great. That's what mercy feels like. Like when people that don't know you show up and care about you. There's something about mercy that is so powerful and so foreign in our world that when we feel it and when we experience, we're like, wow, this matters a great deal. You see, this is what Jesus is inviting us to be a part of. A few weeks ago, we talked about helping out in the Panhandle, and by the grace of God, we've been able to send them money. I talked to Pastor Yuri. Pastor Yuri actually went to the schools. I don't know if you know this. We got some pictures of the schools up in the Panhandle in the area where they're doing ministry. Those schools, some of them were mostly wiped out. Some were partially wiped out. They experienced damage in some parts of the campus, not necessarily in other parts of the campus. A lot of supplies got wiped out. Pastor Yuri actually sat down with the schools, with the teachers. And he said, how can we help? How can we help? And you got to understand, they're in the middle of all this stuff. They're just overwhelmed. The teachers have gone back to try to prepare, and they're trying to get students back and stuff. But they're without so much. He asked them, what is it that you need? And you got a list when you came in. And that list says Hurricane Michael teacher and student relief. Pastor Yuri said they're actually running out of supplies up there. And when they sat down, they said, what do you need? He said, paper towels, journals, crayons, markers. I don't know what kind of books, but pens, bins. A lot of teachers like the bins that have wheels on them. That's how they can bring their stuff in and out of class. Pencils, colored pencils, paper, copy paper. I mean, look at this. Lysol, wipes, folders, erasers. It's like they got wiped out. Dry erase markers, glue, tape, backpacks, lunch boxes, flashlights, plastic file boxes. Look at that last one. Whiteboards. Can you imagine being a teacher going, we need a whiteboard. I have no whiteboards. That's the list that they gave them. And so here's the deal. Next Saturday and Sunday, we're going to have a semi-trailer out here. A semi-trailer. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill that thing up Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 5, right here. Those are the things that they need. Let me encourage you guys. I want to just challenge you to think about this, what it's like to be on the receiving end of mercy, and what it's going to feel like for them to roll up and to be able to experience what it is. Oh, here is a case of whiteboards. Here is a case of Lysol wipes. Here's a case of pens and pencils. Here is a case of these things for you. And for them to be able to experience that. For you to have the opportunity yourself and with your children and with the people you work with and your school and your business. Because if we're going to fill up a semi-trailer, guys, we can put a lot in there. But it's bigger than us. But this is the invitation to create the kind of a world where stuff like this can happen. They don't know who you are. But what's going to happen is they're going to receive the aid that we give them. And Pastor Yuri said this. He goes, by the way, don't worry about giving too much. He said we are connected with 3 or 4 other churches in our community that are all trying to do the same thing. Any overflow we get, we're going to be sharing with them so that they can distribute it in the areas where they're doing ministry as well. And we're going to do this together. So let me encourage you. Next Saturday and Sunday, come with your car full, your trunk full. Bring cases of stuff. Go on Amazon if you want to. Get it by the case. Go to Staples. Go wherever you can. Get a lot of it. In cases, it's easy to ship, easy to handle. It's easy to put a case of something in a school and let the teachers come and help themselves to it. But what they're going to experience on their end is what mercy looks like. When people that they don't know say, we care about what you're going through because we've been through it ourselves. And when that happens, God's going to get the credit for it, not us. It's going to be God that's going to get the credit for it. So you guys with us on that? Because I hope, because let me tell you, the thought of filling a semi-truck freaks me out. But I'm trusting God. And here's what I'm trusting God for. I'm trusting God that when Jesus invites you to create a world where mercy wins the day, that will be enough. That your desire to let others be a part of that as well, at work, at school, wherever that is, take that list, distribute it. Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 5. If you come to church next week, man, bring a carload. If you go, oh, I forgot, well, you'll see the semi-truck. Go, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to bring it. But let me encourage you guys. What Jesus is doing is inviting people to create a world that they did not believe could exist. You know, when I was a kid, second grade, there was a kid in our neighborhood that was a bully, and we were swimming in a neighbor's pool, and that kid dunked me. And I remember sitting on the bottom of the pool, disoriented, taking in water, looking up, and realizing I'm looking at the surface from the bottom. And something triggered in me, and I kicked off the bottom, and I came to the surface, coughed up a bunch of water, and I had a phobia of water after that. But what used to happen to me is I used to have dreams when I was a kid that I could swim like a fish. I used to have dreams that I was like swimming and I could breathe underwater and I could cruise underwater and I was so free underwater and I could thrive underwater. And then I'd wake up and I'd go, oh, it was only a dream. But there's something about that dream and how good it made me feel that somehow helped me to get over eventually my fear of the water, my phobia of the water. I couldn't even put my face in the water before. And it helped me to get past that. Jesus, for the people, was expressing what for them would have just been a dream. A world of mercy, where mercy rules the day. Who's creating that? And that's the question. Who's creating that? And the invitation of Jesus was God's creating that. And if you're willing to allow your story to become a part of that story, then you, along with God, will experience what it is to live a life that is greater than the life that you're living. To be able to know that your story matters for so much more than the story that you've known. To know that God can take the painful chapters of your life and turn it for good for somebody else. The choice that you make that brings healing and power into your life is the choice that I will make a difference. that I will not sit back with injustice, that I will not sit back while people suffer and people struggle, that I'm not going to make it all about my comfort, but that I am going to give my life to make a difference so people can see the world that God is creating and I can live in it now before it gets here. That's what he wants to do. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes if you would and to bow your head. Can you hear Jesus inviting you into that life? Can you hear him calling you to step into the opportunity with God to create a reality that the world does not know and can only imagine as though it were a dream? Do you see that your story matters a lot to God? And that you play a role, and maybe you haven't seen it, but you play an important role in the story that God is unfolding and writing on the hearts of human history. And he's inviting you to step into it. He's inviting you to allow him to write a new chapter. One that maybe some of you have been afraid to even dream about. Afraid to believe. But it's why he offers it. He offers it to you. For some of you here today, to be able to make a difference means that it starts with admitting your need for God, like we talked about last week. To say, God, if I'm going to live that kind of life, if that kind of stuff is going to be able to grow in my heart, then I need you to do something in my heart, because those aren't the things that I'm about. But God, I want to be about that. Then right where you are, if you've never opened up your life and surrendered, it's the way that you begin to make a difference by letting God make a difference in you first. And maybe you go, God, then I need it to be real. I need it to be more than just a dream and more than just religious talk. I need you to come into my life. And I can't do it without you, and I don't want to. But I do want you. And with your eyes closed and your heads bowed, if you go, man, that's exactly what's living inside of me, I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. That's your way of letting God know, God, that's me. That's me, God. God, I want you in my life. God, I want you to write a new story. God, I want you to take the painful chapters and make it count for something good. God, I want you to take all of my mistakes and all the pain that I've caused and make it count for something good. Okay. Then right where you are, you can pray. And you can pray to God just like this. Dear Lord, I need you. I need you in my life. And I need you to take all the pain of my story and weave it into your story, where your healing and your power can take root in me. Where I care about things that I've never cared about. Where I can give my life to things that will matter in the lives of other people. So I ask you, forgive me of all my sin. Come into my life with your power. Change me from the inside. I surrender. Make a difference in me so I can make a difference in the world. Thank you, Lord. And Lord, thank you for the invitation to not just passively sit back, to not just allow humility to look like I'm just laying down and I'm giving up, but God, to take the power that you've given us and to use it to lift someone else up, to build up others, and to leverage it for good. God, thank you that you've invited all of us to step into creating a world that is so foreign to so many people, but that through us they can get a glimpse and see what your kingdom looks like. Lord, may you get all the credit. God, fill that truck. Let everything that's given be an expression of your love, and let it be experienced that way. Love through us. Bring mercy through us. Thank you that we can give our lives to a life that will prevail. Thank you, Lord. It's in Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, give it up for God, you guys.